What's up, guys? Welcome back to another Fish the Moment live stream. It's been a while since I talked to you guys, so I might be a little bit rusty at this, but for those of you who are new to the channel, this is a live stream where I'm going to be breaking down subscribers' lakes who are on my Patreon page. And if you want to submit your lakes to this live stream, check out the little icon over here, over there in the bottom right side of the screen, and go to that webpage. And if you sign up for my Patreon, you can get your lake submitted for this live stream. And if this is your first video, this is a little bit different format from what I normally do. So if you want more instruction videos, stuff on your graphs, electronics, fishing strategies, where to fish, how to fish, anything like that, check out my other normal short form videos. But these live streams are for you guys to ask me questions and interact with me. So really excited to see everyone on the chat again, and people are going crazy in the chat already. Good to see everyone again. Today, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be breaking down 3 subscribers' lakes for wintertime bass fishing. So I'm probably going to focus like in that January, February time. So depending on the type of or the part of the country you're in, January and February could be pre-spawn, it could be spawn, it could also be the middle of the winter. And we have 3 different lakes that are going to be in different times of the bass's migration cycle. So the first lake we have is Dale Hollow Lake in Tennessee, and that lake will probably be in a late winter, maybe early pre-spawn pattern. And then Lake Panasoffkee in Florida, not sure if I pronounced that right, is down in Florida, and the fish are probably about to start getting on the beds in the next few weeks to spawn. And then we have Carlyle Lake in Illinois, where the lake, I don't know if it's actually frozen there. I didn't actually check, but we can talk about what you guys should be doing as either the lake is thawing out or as you're seeing really cold temperatures up there in Illinois. So really good schedule today for the stream, and got a bunch of people on. We got, let's see here, Caleb Morgan, good to see you, man. Dean, Lifestyle Bassin, how's it going? Checking me out from Utah. See here, Steve Batista, good to see you, man. Clifford Zuber, is always good to see you, man. Alex Vincent, BJ, and the Monticello, Arkansas crew tuning in today. Good to see you guys on the stream. Gabe and Kyle, everyone, good to see you guys. So excited to be breaking down some of these lakes, so I'm just going to give it a couple more minutes here to make sure that everyone's on and everyone's seeing the content. And just so you guys know, this video will be uploaded to YouTube right after the stream is done, so you can go back, look at all the spots I'm checking out on Navionics and Google Earth, stuff like that, so you can, study it in detail and listen to what I'm saying. I kind of have a tendency to talk fast on these live streams, so hopefully you guys are catching what I'm saying. So, let's see here. Man, tons of people on. Good to see everyone. So, first up, guys, let me know what you guys have been fishing lately. If you guys are ice fishing, if you are able to fish from a boat, if you're down in Florida and you're relaxing in t-shirts, or you're up in like Maine fishing through the ice in like shanties, stuff like that, let me know, because I want to hear what you guys are doing. So leave that in the comments. And then other than that, we're going to jump right into the first lake here, which is Dale Hollow Reservoir in Tennessee. Okay, so here we go. Dale Hollow Reservoir. So this is a legendary fishery in Tennessee known for giant smallmouth. And I think that at one point it had the world record smallmouth coming out of this lake. I don't know if that's been broken. I think it may have been broken in California at this point, but it used to have the world record smallmouth, giant smallmouth in this lake. And this is a really deep, clear fishery in Tennessee, and there's a lot of lakes like this around the country that are deep and clear and that are pretty fun to fish in the wintertime when the lakes aren't frozen over. Tennessee won't be frozen over, so you can get your boat on the lake, and even if the water temperatures are in the low 40s, high 30s, you can still get these bass to bite. And so what I want to do is just kind of walk you through different parts of Dale Hollow, show you where I would fish, and give you some ideas on what to look for. As you can see, I got a bunch of spots already marked out, so let's take a look at that. So down here we have the dam, and the dam end of Dale Hollow has a lot clearer water, and the reason you could tell it's clearer water is because you can see it's really dark blue or almost black. And then as you move up the lake, you actually have some dirtier water. You can see this water is a lot more brown, and some of it has a kind of a green tint to it. And so this is the river section. So you have clear water that might have 10 feet of visibility on the dam end, and then you have a dirty part of the lake, which is has a lot of dirty water, and any rain that comes in is going to flow through this river, dirtying up the water even more. The water is going to be really cold back up in this river system here, so these areas are going to be really cold. Water temps could be even into the 30s, especially if you get some cold rain or some snow. And then the lower end of the lake, where it's deeper and clear, are not going to be as cold in the wintertime, so you'll have water temperatures hovering between probably 45 and 50 degrees depending on the weather. I know it's going to be really cold the next few weeks, so pretty exciting to see how that's going to affect the fish, especially here in Arkansas. The water temperatures haven't dropped that much. They're still like 48 degrees. So excited to see what those cold weather is going to do to the bass. Might turn that jerkbait bite on. So basically, what I like to do when I go to a clear lake like this in the wintertime is I try to stay away from the super clear water. Just in general, I don't like fishing in super clear water any time of the year, just because those fish are a little bit harder to catch, and they bite dependent on the weather. So if you have like a cloudy, windy day, they'll bite really well in the clear water. But if you get a sunny day with no wind, it's sometimes hard to get those fish to bite. And if you're fishing a tournament, it's tough to fish this area and not know if the fish are going to bite one day or not bite the other just because of the weather. So because of that, what I like to do is focus on the midsections of some of these lakes. And specifically in the wintertime, I like to focus on some of the major creeks on the midsection of these lakes. The midsection of lakes are probably going to have water temperatures that are anywhere between 45, 44, 45 degrees, sometimes sipping into the low 40s because of that dirtier water. And the water visibility is going to be 2 to 3 feet. So pretty good visibility still if you want to fish a jerkbait, fish an Alabama rig, stuff like that. But it's just dirty enough that those fish will be active even if it's really sunny and no clouds. And just so you guys know, if this is your first stream, I'm going to be getting to all of your comments here in a second. I normally go through every single, or I go through the lake first, so I'll go through Dale Hollow Reservoir first, and then after I finish that up, I'll go and answer all your comments, then I'll jump to the next lake. And sorry if I'm talking a little bit all over the place. I haven't done one of these live streams in a little while, so I need to get back into practice. So anyways, let's jump into a couple of these spots. So if you look at some of these creeks, I really like the look of some of these creeks here on Dale Hollow on this midsection of the lake. As you can see, there's lots of little secondary points. You have nice pockets all over the place. Lots of places where these fish could move in to spawn. You also have like a mixture of that dirtier water with the clearer water, which is really good. And really what I'm looking for on these wintertime, or when I'm fishing in the wintertime on these deep clear lakes, are places where the creek channel runs right up against the bank and forms bluff walls and bluff ends. And this is a example of a bluff end on a Navionics map, or a Google Earth map, but I'm going to show you on Navionics what they actually look like, and then we'll switch back and forth to show you what I'm talking about. But just in general, if you look here, you can see that there's some really nice rock down this bank, and then it kind of ends in a little secondary point and then leads into a pocket. These are ideal places to catch winter bass on these deep, clear lakes in the wintertime. And the reason for that is because what will happen is that these fish will pull out of these pockets in the fall, get out of that shallower water when the water cools down, and they'll sit out here right off these really deep bluff walls. You have like 100 feet of water in here, and I'll show you that in a second. And what they'll do is they'll sit out here when it's really cold, and then when the water starts to warm up, if you get a sunny day or maybe you get a warming trend, those fish will start to pull up onto these rocky banks because the rock hold heat. And they want to get close to places where they're going to spawn. Throughout the entire winter, the key is you really want to look for places where the bluff walls or where the creek channel runs up against a bank, creating a bluff wall. And you want to find places where the creek channel is really close to a spawning pocket, like this pocket here. So if we jump over to Navionics really quick, I'll show you exactly what this spot looks like. So we're going to zoom in here, and the spot we're just looking at, let me actually double check where we're at. Switch back here. I gotta make sure I'm looking at the right spot. Okay, it's right there. Cool. So we're right here. So here's that pocket that I was talking about with that bluff wall. And so if you notice here, if you guys are familiar with Navionics maps, this is the creek channel. So as you can see, the creek channel is basically where you have the deepest water, and you can kind of tell because you'll see these darker lines where the contour lines are really close together. And if we just read these contour lines, you see like 90 feet, 87 feet, and then where it's lighter blue, you'll have like 50 feet of water, 30 feet of water, all the way up to, the bank, which is a foot, 2 feet. And so basically what you're looking at here is this creek channel that's winding through this creek. And this area right here we're just looking at is a bluff wall, because basically that creek channel runs up really close to it. And you can see these contour lines are really tight together. They're basically right on top of each other, forming a black line. And then right when you get to this point, they start to spread out, and you get this little area where there's no contour lines, and then you see these contour lines are more spread out all the way to the back of this pocket. That means it's shallower back here. And what these fish will do is they'll pull out of these pockets, out of these light blue areas, which is the flats, and they'll be here in the fall, and they'll want to spawn here in the spring when you get to like, March, April time. And then once you have the temperature start to cool down and the water temperatures dip into the 50s or low 40s, the bass will pull off of these flatter areas into these creek channels or riverbeds. And so you'll have these creek channels, and it'll be 100 feet of water, and they'll just chill out here for most of the winter because they have that deep water. It'll be a little bit warmer, and the shad like to pull into these channels as well so they can feed up. But then whenever you get some warmer water, or you get like a sunny day like I was mentioning earlier, it'll warm up the rocks and it'll warm up the water on some of these steeper banks, and those bait fish will move up to the bank to start feeding on plankton. The crayfish will also start getting more active. They'll start jumping around. Those bass will start eating the crayfish as well, crawfish. And so what these bass will do is they'll pull out of this creek channel, and they'll pull right up to these steep, bluffy banks to feed. And so what you want to do is you want to look for areas where this creek channel is really close to a spawning pocket. And as you can see here, here's a nice creek channel, and there's a bluff wall on both sides that kind of ends in this nice spawning pocket. This is places where the bass are actually move in to spawn. And what you want to do is you want to fish the areas where the creek channel transitions into this creek. So you have 80, 90 feet of water, and then it starts to shallow out as you move back into this creek. And these bass are going to want to stay as close to these spawning areas as possible, because right when that water temperature starts to warm up to the mid 50s, they're going to start pushing back into these pockets, and once it hits 60, they're going to start spawning all up and down these banks. And a lot of times those warming trends can happen quickly within like a week or two, and that water temperature can just shoot up. And so the bass will be chilling in this creek channel in that, a little bit warmer water, chasing, feeding up on shad. And then as it starts to warm up, they'll start to migrate back in these creeks, and they'll start to spawn. And so, basically you want to be fishing the outside of this pocket on this bluff wall. You also want to fish the point of this pocket, right where that creek channel swings up against the point, and the bank starts to kind of get a little bit shallower. You have a really steep bank where the contour lines are really close together, and you can see those contour lines start to spread out, and that means that you have a transition on the bottom where the bank is super steep and it starts to get a little bit less steep. Actually, I need to go this way. So you have it like straight up and down, and then it starts to gradually turn to like a 45-degree bank, and then it goes flat in the backs of these creeks. And those fish like to sit on those like 60-degree banks or those 45-degree banks this time of year a lot of times, because it's easy for them to move to the deep water, but also easy for them to move up shallow to feed. So, as I'm moving through this creek, really what I'm looking for are places where that creek channel swings up against all of these spawning pockets. So it's really obvious places. Really, all you have to do is just follow this creek channel. I'm following it through. Boom. You have a little point right here leading into a spawning pocket, and then that creek channel swings across the mouth of this pocket. Here's another really good point, and you have a nice little flat area that these fish can kind of stage on in the pre-spawn. So this could be a good area in like March. In that 30 foot of water, you can fish a jig down there, fish a Carolina rig. And when you're fishing these areas where the creek channel swings up against these main lake points in the mouth of these pockets, I like to fish an Alabama rig, a jerkbait, a Ned rig, or a football jig. And one of the really popular things to do on Dale Hollow is actually fishing a jig and dragging it down some of these banks. And so if we pull up this bank right here, Let's see here. You have this bank right here. You can see that it's, a nice channel swing here. It's actually not a really good bank. Let me find a better one. Here we go. You can see these banks right here are really rocky. And what'll happen is that there's like almost ledges to these rocks. And so you'll have a ledge that goes out to, 10 feet, and then it'll drop straight down, and it'll go to another ledge that's 20 feet, and then 30 feet, and 40 feet. And those fish will sit on those ledges. And so what these guys will do is they'll get on these bluff walls in the mouths of these pockets, and they'll drag a jig, and they'll put their boat a cast and a half away from the bank, and they'll cast almost up to the bank, maybe 15 feet short of the bank, and then drag that jig back super slow down these bluff walls off the points of these pockets, right where that creek channel swings up right against here, and then it swings away, and you have that little bit shallower point. They'll drag the jigs off these points and down these banks, and they'll catch really big smallmouth and really big largemouth. And that's like the number one deal in the wintertime on Dale Hollow, is either fishing that jig or fishing an Alabama rig down those steps of the drop. Another thing that they're going to do if we transition back over to Navionics is they're going to be looking for banks that they can throw crankbaits. And we'll talk about this later in the stream, but crankbaits are a really good winter bait. And a lot of people don't understand the power of a crankbait in the wintertime. They think, you have to fish really slow. The water temperatures are 40 degrees, 30 degrees. You have to just crawl your baits on the bottom, fish them super slow. But it's not always the case. If you get a warming trend where you have a really bright sunny day for a couple days in a row, that'll warm up the water a couple degrees, and it'll get those fish super active. And what you can do is you can actually run further back in these creeks, like run all the way back into this creek back in here, where the dirty water starts to mix with the cleaner water. So this pocket probably has 2 to 3 foot of visibility in here, and then it probably has like 6 inches of visibility way back in this creek. But what you want to do is find the areas where that dirty water and that clean water mix, which is normally probably going to be somewhere around this part of your creek. And what these guys are looking for are 45-degree banks leading into these pockets. And so normally when I'm trying to look for these areas, I'm less concerned about where that creek channel lies, and I'm more worried about the angle of that bank. And I'll be making a video on this really soon about fishing those 45-degree banks. But let me show you an example of one really quick here, going back over to Google Earth. So this is a deal where, don't worry too much about your Navionics. You don't even have to use your graphs. All you have to do is literally just use your eyes and find a 45-degree sloping bank. So if we go back into this creek back in here, we pull up on this bank right here, you can tell that sometimes you have a 45-degree bank, because if you look right here, you'll see that the bank is really steep. You can barely, if this loads, just give me a second here, it's getting a little bit fuzzy on me. So you can see there's barely any bank showing. So it's like trees and then water, and you can barely see a sliver of the bank. That's going to be a 60-degree bank or a 90-degree bank. So it's basically drops from shallow water to deep water super fast. Well, if we move further down this bank, you can start to see, these banks start to have a little bit more you can see a little bit more of the bank showing. So here you have the trees, and you can actually physically see some of the ground, and you can actually see there's some nice chunk rock in here, and then you'll have the water. And so when you could see a small sliver of bank, that normally indicates you're going to have somewhere around a 60-degree to a 45-degree bank. And what these guys will do is they'll find these 45-degree banks where it's like has some rock, it's leading into a spawning pocket. Maybe you'll have some dirtier water. So you can see right here you have some clean water, it's a lot darker, and then you have some brown water back in here. They'll find places where that dirty water and the clean water mix, and they'll just fish a storm wigglewort or like a strike king cavity 1.5 flat, and they'll just crank it down in 7 to 9 feet of water really slow in those rocks down those 45-degree banks. And basically what you want to do is just run as many of those 45-degree banks as you can that have wind blowing on them and that have sun on them. Those are the two keys for those banks. You want to have sun, and you want to have some kind of wind blowing on those banks. That gets the fish active. And the sun is more important than the wind for sure. And then, if we look over here, just to give you an idea, there's a lot more of this bank showing. This is like a 30-degree bank or almost a flat bank. So I would say that these are banks you can pretty much skip, because you can see there's quite a bit of land between the water and the trees. Less land between the water and the trees here. That's a 45-degree bank. And then no land between the water and the trees. That's a steep bluff wall. So that's pretty much what you want to look for on these type of lakes. So there's other stuff I want to talk about, but those are the key things to really look at. I need to jump over to the next lake. I'm a little bit slow on delivery right now, guys. Apologize for that. Still trying to get my legs underneath me on these live streams. But two things to remember: look for those 45-degree banks, and then look for all the places where a creek channel swings up against a spawning pocket like this, and then fish these points and fish these bluff walls with a jerkbait Alabama rig and jig. And if you do that, you're going to catch some toads out on Dale Hollow, guaranteed. So I want to jump over to the comments. I know I got a ton of people. 139 people on. That's that's the most ever. And also got the $5 super chat from Realistic Fishing. Thanks, man. Really appreciate. I really appreciate the support and checking all my videos. If you don't know who Realistic Fishing is, he makes awesome fishing videos, very funny fishing videos, and keeps it real just like I do. Doesn't hold anything back. He'll show all the bloopers and all the errors, just like I show all my spots without holding anything back. I just tell you exactly what I'm doing. So great channel. Go check out his stuff. Great guy there. So wow, got so many comments. Let me go see. Wow, so many people. Everyone's saying, hey. I'm just going to try to kind of quickly go through this. People saying it's frozen over. Gabriel saying your videos are flawless. Thank you, man. Clifford spelling my name wrong. That's okay. I'll forgive you on that one, Clifford. Appreciate the support as always. Really a big mix of warm and then cold water and then frozen, which is really interesting. Obviously, as you can tell, there's lots of different water temperatures, lots of different seasons going on across the country. And so that's why I'm trying to pick lakes in different areas of the country so that we can get an idea of what the fish are doing in Florida, where it's super warm, all the way up to Illinois, where it's almost frozen, if not frozen. Clifford says, income tax time, ready for a guided trip. I'll drive to Arkansas too. About to start doing some guided fishing trips. I am 2 Patreon members away from hitting my goal of doing guided fishing trips. So if you guys want me to do guided fishing trips, go join my Patreon page on the link over here in the bottom right corner. And if you do that, you'll have a chance to put your lakes in for these live streams. Plus, I'll start doing some guided trips for you guys. So that should be pretty fun. Gabriel's asking if that's a free Navionics site. Yes, this Navionics is free to use. The link is right there. So it's webapp.navionics.com. All these lakes are free and easy to use, which is awesome. And then best spot to find largemouth in mid-February. I've got a tournament out there. So I would probably focus on those 45-degree banks I was talking about. They're in the backs of those creeks, so fishing like a crankbait or a jig down those 45-degree banks in that mid-February time. And that's normally, the further back you get in these creeks on Dale Hollow, the more likely you're going to find those largemouth. And so I would focus on some of these creeks back in here. This creek probably has a good 45-degree bank on it, just from like experience, and probably some of these creeks too. And I would just fish these creeks with that wiggle wart or KVD 1.5 flat or a jig, maybe even fishing a spinnerbait if the water's really dirty and it's warming up. You can catch some good largemouth doing that. See here. Alan says a flat grassy mess in Florida. We're about to go to a flat grassy mess here in a second, so we'll be able to talk about that. Let's see here. Gabriel says just needs to get better at finding fish offshore. Like Alan says, I got some good videos for that, so check that out. Just put out a pretty good one there. See here. All kinds of people on. Clayton Westfall says, so glad I finally got to view a live stream. Glad you're here, man. Appreciate that. And then so many comments. Okay. How do you look at bass on a pond? A featureless pond this time of year. Well, we're about to go to a featureless lake right now, so I think that's a really good transition. We're about to jump over to a lake in Florida, which literally is featureless. Well, it's not exactly featureless. No lake is featureless, but let's jump over there, and we're going to go to Lake, what's it called? Panasoffkee in Florida. I'm probably butchering that. I apologize, guys. I also feel like I'm getting in my groove a little bit. I'm feeling it. 133 people are still here, despite the hot mess that ensued at the beginning, so I appreciate the support, guys. So here we go. We have Lake Panasoffkee. This is a lake in Florida, and we have the Harris chain of lakes literally right here, which is a world-renowned fishery. The Bassmasters and the FLW Tour fish here all the time. The FLW Tour had an event there last year, and it took like 100 pounds to win for over 4 days. So there's giant bass in here. And if you take a look at this lake, you can actually see right now that these lakes are really drawn down. If you kind of see from these images, you can see that these lakes are really drawn down, and it's actually a really good way to see some of these underwater structures on these lakes. And if you guys don't know how to do this, you can actually go to Google Earth. You have to download the desktop app to do this. It doesn't work on your phone app, but there's this little button here that says Show Historical Imagery. It's a clock with an arrow pointing to the left, and it'll pop up this menu, and you can go back in time and find pictures of when the lake was, full and filled up. You can see there's nice grass and stuff here. Then you can take it back in time and see, okay, here's another image where the lake is fully filled. And then fully filled doesn't make sense, but when the lake is filled, and then you can get that image I was just showing where the lake is way down. And that's really helpful when you're looking at grassy lakes and when you're looking at any lake that has been man-made, because a lot of times you can find images where the lake has been drawn down really low. And so one thing that I want to point out here on this Panasoffkee Lake, if we jump over to Navionics really quick, is that it is a shallow lake. Like when we talk featureless, it is featureless. It's literally shallow the entire way. There's no deep water. It's the deepest I'm finding is like 9 feet deep. So when you're talking about the pond, I forgot who put that comment there, but someone was saying, about that pond, how do you fish a featureless lake or a featureless pond? This is a really good example of that, because if you look, the contour lines are super spread apart. Right here, there's zero depth change for like 300 yard circle here. So it's definitely a flat lake. It's basically like a big bowl, or like a plate almost. It's not, I couldn't even call it a bowl because it's not even that deep. And this is really intimidating when you get out here. There's just grass everywhere. If we go back to Google Earth, you can see, or go back to Navionics, go back to Navionics. You can see that the lake is full of grass. All of this stuff in here is grass everywhere. And if we bring an image from further in the future and time travel just a little bit, you can see that there's just grass everywhere. This is all grass. And you can see little holes in the grass, little drains, ditches, all kinds of stuff. And I really like this historical image because you can actually see some of these ditches and drains, which are really hard to see otherwise. And so what I want to start doing is showing you how you can use Google Earth to actually find some of these staging areas for these bass that are just about to move up to spawn. Like some of the guys are saying in the comments, you have lakes right now that are really warm. So in Florida, the water temperatures on some of these lakes might be in the 50s or maybe getting into the 60s. And normally bass start to spawn in Florida at the end of January and into the beginning of February and throughout February. And so right now there's going to be bass that are spawning, they're getting ready to spawn, staging to spawn, and some bass that might be in their late winter patterns. And on a lake that's like 9 feet deep, at its deepest point, these fish aren't ever going to get deep. But what they're going to do is they're going to want to try to stage in the deepest water they can find around the spawning flats. And so what I like to do when I find these images with the lake drawn down is I want to look for ditches, I want to look for drains, and I want to look for small depressions in these grass fields. So first up, I want to talk about a ditch. And this is a really nice example of a ditch right here. As you can see, you have this line of grass, and if we take the lake back a little bit, you can see that there's, this nice little ditch here, and right here, you can see it has some really clean water. And in Florida, you always want to look for clean water when you're trying to find spawning areas for these bass. And so if you think about it, these bass are trying to spawn, they're getting ready to spawn, and if they're wanting to spawn, they want to spawn on clean water areas because it's better for their eggs. It helps light gets their eggs better, and they also want to find protected areas. And this little cut in here is really nice and protected from the wind. It has these nice islands protecting it, and so this is an ideal spawning area for these bass. So what you have to think about then is, okay, the bass want to spawn here. Well, before they spawn, they're probably going to be sitting out away from these spawning areas, right out in front of them, out here. And that would make perfect sense. They'll move out here to a little bit deeper water when it gets cold, and then they'll move back into these spawning areas when they want to spawn. And so what we can do is take that lake back to when the little spawning pocket is completely dry, and we can look for areas right out in front of this spawning area that have some deeper water on them. And so if you look here, there's a nice little ditch that runs in right here between this island and this bank. And so this is all water where they'll spawn. And right here is an area where they're going to stage, because that's the deepest water in this area, right around this little cut. And there's also some deep water right out in front here. When you can see there's some really nice grass in here, but if you look, this grass is like kind of green, and you can really tell that that's grass, and then it gets really dark and black. That's where you have that deeper water, or a ditch, which is basically, there's a foot of water here where that grass is, and then you have 2 or 3 feet of water next to it where the water gets a little bit deeper. And so those bass will sit in those depressions or those ditches. And when you find a fish, or when you're trying to find fish in the pre-spawn or in that like late January, early February time in Florida, you want to find these depressions right in the mouths of these spawning areas or next to spawning flats. And so what you can do is fish a lipless crankbait or a chatterbait or a swim bait or even a Cinco in those ditches that are flooded. And if we take the lake back to the area where we saw it, you can see, boom, you could never tell the ditch is there. But you can see that the water's back up, and this is where they're going to spawn. And so you can now go onto your Google Earth and say, okay, I know there's a ditch right here. I'm going to put my boat out here in front of the spawning pocket and make fan casts into that ditch with the chatterbait, with the crankbaits, and with the worms, and normally pick off some really big bass they're staging in those ditches. Another area that looked really good, let me go back to this view, is you have some nice spawning pockets back in here. They actually have like a nice little spawning area with a dude running back in here. And again, you can see that out in front, it's pretty shallow, but you can see that there's some areas where there's a nice little like ditch or a little trench that runs through this spawning flat. And so right here is another great spot where those fish will stage. And so you can set up your boat on either this side of the ditch or this side of the ditch, and then cast a chatterbait or a crankbait, lipless crankbait, something into those ditches, and those fish are either going to move into this pocket to spawn, or they're going to move into this creek and spawn. And so this is like a dynamite area. Here's another little ditch right here that's running through this flat, and if we take the lake back up, you can see, can't tell anything's there. You can't see anything with the naked eye, but when you take that lake back, boom, all this stuff becomes really clear. And so what these fish will do is they'll set up in this little ditch. They might set up in this little, you can see there's another little ditch. You can also almost see that there's like used to be like an old pond or something in this lake. And so it's really easy to pick out where to go. Like, okay, here's a little ditch. This is a nice like pond levee almost, which that pond levee is going to protect this area from the wind. So if the wind's blowing from the west, this little pond levee that's underwater normally, if you look here, it's completely underwater. This will protect these areas from the wind. This is an even better view. Wow, this is the first view I had. And so you can see this is your little ditch. This is where the fish are going to pull in and stage, and then they're going to move back into this pond, and they're going to spawn all up in here on the edges of this flat. They'll spawn right down this little break line, because as you can see, it's deeper water and then it gets shallower. And you can almost, what you can do is just follow this little break line all the way around and just either fan cast out here in the middle, because they might spawn out here in a little bit deeper water, or they're going to spawn on the edge of this old like pond or whatever this was. And so this, I mean, look at that. It is beautiful. That little like pond. You can just fish all these little points and stuff too. That's where those fish are going to move up to spawn. They'll just spawn around those points. Another thing you can do is, if you don't want to fish around that man-made looking stuff, you might want to try to move up here and try to figure out, okay, on the top end of the lake, how do I find fish in an area that looks like this? Well, as you can see here, you have another really good spawning, potentially good spawning area. And if you look up in here, you can see that there's some nice spawning pockets. They're protected from the wind. They have some nice clean water. You have one right here. You have one right here. And this is the places where those bass are going to spawn, even back up behind this little stretch in here. They're going to spawn all the way through there. They'll also spawn back up in this area. These are probably really popular areas on this lake. When you get into the springtime, I bet there's a ton of guys in January, February, March looking in these little creeks looking for spawning bass. But before they get there in late January, early February, you want to try to find those fish that are staging just outside of those places, like we talked about earlier. So places I would look for, if we take that lake back down, are areas like this. As you can see here, you have some nice little small ditches and little drains that feed this pocket right here. So if we take the lake back up, you have a nice pocket. You can see, you can't tell there's anything here. Whoops. You can't tell there's anything here. You take that lake back down, and you can see, boom, nice little depression, and those fish will use these depressions like highways to move back up in these pockets and in through here. So I would fish these little depressions with, again, a Texas rig worm, like a striking cutter worm, striking red eye shad, a chatterbait, maybe a spinner bait, stuff like that, and just kind of drag it through those little ditches. Same thing kind of as you move back in here. So you can see there's some small little ditches that run through these flats and kind of connect through, and you can kind of follow these ditches and kind of just crank the grass, like fish a Lippel's crankbait, pop it free of the grass, fish it through all these areas, and you're going to catch some good fish. So those are areas I would check out in January, and then as the water starts to warm up and those bass start to get on the beds, I would just ease my way out from in front of these spawning flats or out in front of these spawning pockets, and move from fishing out here on those ditches up into the grass and start flipping and looking for spawning bass, sight fishing, stuff like that. So that's how I would handle a featureless lake. This is a Florida lake, but if you have another lake like this in your area of the country, I know there's a lot of lakes in Wisconsin that kind of sit up like this, where it's just a deep bowl and there's not that many features on the lake. It's pretty much featureless. And even though you think it's featureless, a lot of times there's those small ditches and small drains in the grass that can hold a lot of big fish. So definitely be looking for that stuff when you're checking out those lakes. So let me get back to 130 people are still on watching this. That is fantastic. So let me keep going through all of this. Someone's saying, Kyle Whitmer saying, don't forget the float and fly. It's a good suggestion. That was out on Dale Hollow. Float and fly is definitely good. Do you throw oversized square bills? Go Reyes ass. I do. I love fishing the giant, like the KVD 8.0 square bill crankbait, and I fish that in the post spawn. And normally I like to fish that when the fish are getting on shell beds offshore. And what I'll do is, like on the Tennessee River or Lake Dardanelle in Arkansas, or the Arkansas River even, basically any place where there's good current, a lot of times the bass, after they spawn, will pull out onto main lake shoals and bars. And if you guys don't know what any of those things mean, check out one of the videos on my channel that says it's called A Complete Guide to Contour Line Maps, or a complete guide to topo maps, and it'll explain all the structures I'm talking about in all of these breakdowns. And so basically you want to look for those shoals and those ridges out on the main lake, and they'll be in like 2 or 3, 4 feet of water, and I'll grind that big crankbait through there. And what happens on those Tennessee River lakes or like Lake Dardanelle, you'll have giant gizzard shad that are 6, 7, 8 inches long, and that big crankbait imitates that bait fish. And so really the times that I fish that big crankbait is when you have dirty water and you have giant shad, giant gizzard shad those bass are feeding on. Let's see here. Carlyle isn't frozen yet, but it will be after this week. Okay, well, I guess I need to get this breakdown done really quickly so you guys can get out there before the end of the week and do some fishing out there. All Bateo Outdoors is saying, new to your channel, love your content, bro. Thank you, man. How would you locate bass on a featureless pond? That was the Okie Angler, so thank you for that comment. That was a good transition there. Let's see here. Kevin says that you're now one Patreon member from your goal. Thank you, Kevin. Appreciate that. That is awesome. Thanks for the support. Let's see here. Yes, grassy and tree buds are a good sign. Oh, trees budding is a good sign. Sorry, guys, I'm missing some of the context on some of these questions, but have you tried a 1-ounce chatterbait for offshore fishing? Caleb Morgan. I haven't actually. In the pre-spawn, I'll catch them on a 1/2-ounce chatterbait, fishing it in like 8 to 9 feet of water off points and stuff. But I've wanted to buy some of those really big chatterbaits. I just haven't yet. I also want to fish some of those giant scrounger heads. They fish those a lot on the Tennessee River, so I want to give that a try this next year. See here. Cool. So those are some of the questions. I know I'm missing some, guys. I skipped a bunch of comments, but I'll go back to all of these after I finish up the stream, and I will get back through all your comments, making sure I get to everything. So no worries there. So last up, I'm going to jump to Carlyle Lake in Illinois. Again, it's freezing by the minute, and so we have to get to this breakdown really quickly before the lake completely freezes over. So let's jump over to Carlyle Lake. So Carlyle Lake is in Illinois, and this is a shallow, kind of dirty water lake. It probably has water temperatures in the low 40s, high 30s because of these really cold temperatures we have, and it's probably they said it's probably gonna be frozen over quick. But what I want to talk about is then after that lake kind of thaws out. Let's say you get a couple warm weeks. Where are these fish going to be? They're probably going to be at the end of their winter pattern, moving into their pre-spawn patterns and kind of looking to spawn. And the awesome thing about Carlyle Lake is that it is pretty much dirty the entire lake, and so that means you can fish shallow, you can power fish, fish crankbaits, spinnerbaits, jigs, my kind of fishing. And so what I want to talk to you guys about is some of the really good areas I've noticed on here. And before we do that, I just want to show you guys that this lake has like a lower end, which is a little bit cleaner, and it has a really shallow upper end. And there's actually a like river that runs all the way up here, and there's some nice like backwater sloughs, all kinds of awesome looking stuff up here. And I probably am not going to spend too much time looking at this stuff just because it's a lot to look at, but I'm sure there's some good concentrations of fish living up in these like sloughs. There's a nice little old like creek bed that runs through here. All kinds of awesome looking stuff. But this stuff is normally a lot better in the summertime and in the fall, and so you can still catch them up here, especially even in the spawn you can catch them here. But in the pre-spawn, I normally like to focus on the clear, a little bit clearer end of these dirty water lakes, which is down by the dam. Normally it's a little bit better when you have at least some visibility. I talked on Dale Hollow that I don't like fishing in super clear water where it's like 10 foot of visibility, but I do like to have at least like 2 feet, a foot and a half to 2 feet of visibility in the winter, just because it makes those fish a little bit more active. The worst thing, you may have heard this before, but the worst thing you can have is cooling, dirty water. So if your water has like a foot of visibility or less and the water temperature is cooling off, those fish will just completely shut down. And normally that dirtier water cools down faster than the clean water, and it'll also warm up faster than the clean water. And so normally if you're having cold fronts and really cold weather, I focus on a little bit cleaner water. So anyways, back to Carlyle Lake. One thing I love about this lake is it has a ton of riprap, which is one of my favorite things to fish in the wintertime and in the pre-spawn. So in January, February, March, this riprap is everywhere and it looks amazing. Basically, like right here, you have a nice little riprap dike coming off this boat ramp. You have another one coming off here and here. There's just good rock extending into the lake, and then it extends all the way around this lake pretty much. I went into a creek here. Let me go up here again. You have two more right here, and then it goes literally all the way around this lake. If you look, all these secondary points are covered in rocks. There's like little holes or blowouts in these little points, and great places where you can trap current. It just looks so good. You can see all these points, and basically what's going to happen is that the water temperature is going to drop super cold. It's going to freeze over, and these fish are going to probably pull off somewhere out in front of all these little pockets. And then as the water starts to warm up and you get some sunny days, the water starts to thaw, especially if you get sunny days, the water on these rocks is going to warm up the fastest, the quickest. And those bass are going to pull straight to these rocks right when that water starts to warm up, right when you get those sunny days. And they're going to sit near the mouths of these spawning pockets, just like we talked about on Dale Hollow. So right here, this is a spawning pocket. They'll probably set up on this spot right here. Again, another little spawning pocket. They'll set up on these like banks and these points. Another one they'll set up right here. And really what we want to focus on in the wintertime is the steepest rocky banks you can find, and rocky banks that have nice good points on them in the mouths of pockets. And so this point could be really good. And what I would fish down these banks is a chartreuse color flat-sided crankbait. That'd be my number one go-to lure down these rocks. And you could either fish the KVD 1.5 flat, which goes anywhere from 6 to 8 feet deep, or you can fish like some of those balsa flat-sided crankbaits. I know Striking used to make some. There's like the I don't remember what the names of them are, but there's some other flat-sided crankbaits. Let me pull them up real quick. I'll show you guys what I'm talking about. Let's go to Tackle Warehouse real quick. I want to make sure you guys know what I'm talking about. So hard baits, crankbaits. I don't know which crankbaits it'd be under. Maybe this one? Yeah, here we go. The PH Custom Lures Wesley Seeker crankbait. This crankbait is a flat side crankbait. They don't have any good view of it. I wish they had a side view. Let me try to find another one. Let's see here. Sorry guys, I'm just scrolling through Tackle Warehouse. I know that's super fun for everybody, including me. The CP custom baits. Maybe this. Nope. Okay, well, this is one of those flat side crankbaits. Just trust me, it has a flat side. Do I have any up here? I don't have any on me, but it has a flat side crankbait. You guys have probably. I would Google something, but Googling something on a live stream is always just a terrible idea. I don't know what I would get in return for a flat side crankbait, but I'm sure it somehow is going to be some picture of like some naked person or something. Here we go. There we go. Flat side crankbait right there. As you can see, it has a nice flat side. This is a crankbait I would go for. That exact crankbait right there. Chartreuse black back, or Chartreuse blue back. These crankbaits have like a little circuit board bill. They're going to be awesome for deflecting down those rocky banks and just kind of, cranking down there really slow. And that is going to be dynamite on, I think someone said dynamite, but let me transition back over here to Navionics. Nope, that's not what we want. Google Earth, there we go. So basically you want to fish all these little points. And so, as you can see, there's really good rocky point right here leading into the spawning pocket. This is going to be guaranteed fish catch when that water starts to warm up. And I'm talking, the water doesn't have to be warm. I'm talking like 45-degree water temperature is warm in some of these lakes. I've caught fish on Lake Dardanelle. You've probably seen this video if you've watched my channel for any time now, where I was catching fish on a flat side crankbait on Lake Dardanelle on the main river in 6 inches of visibility water, and the water temperature was 40 degrees, like 40.1 degrees. And it's chocolate milk right on the main river, and I was catching fish cranking a dike that looks just like this right here. I was literally cranking. It looks identical to this. And I was just going around these little areas with that flat side crankbait and crushing them. I caught like a limit in the first hour and a half of the morning. It was 30 degrees outside. Water temps are 40. And I'm crushing them on a crankbait. But that's what you can do on some of these dirty water lakes. And really, that's all I would do on this lake. There's so much riprap. I would just literally just pick up that crankbait and I would just crank every single little dike that's close to deep water, every riprap shoreline. I would just crank every single one of them all day long. I wouldn't do anything else. That's all I would do. Maybe I would pick up a jig if the crankbait bite's kind of dying. I might also throw an Alabama rig down some of these banks. You can just basically take an Alabama rig with like 1/4 ounce weights and just fire it down these rocky banks up shallow, like 3, 4, 5 feet of water. You might also be able to catch them on a spinnerbait, shaky head, stuff like that. But I would just fish that flat side crankbait. That would be what I would do all day long. Again, more great looking banks with nice rock. There's so many of these banks that have good rock that you might think, okay, how do I narrow it down? If I only have 8 hours of fish, there's so much of it. Like this looks so good right here. Look at that. Boom. Riprap bank right here in the mouth of a nice little spawning pocket. The bass are definitely going to spawn back in here. These banks right here are going to be money. And most of the time you want to find banks that have sun on them and wind, but if the water temperature is warming up at all, it doesn't matter. It could be shady banks, it can be anything. As long as that water temperature is warming and you have some potentially some sun, potentially some wind, you're going to catch them. So let's go over to Navionics real quick, because I do want to show you what some of these better banks would look like out here. So here's Carlyle. As you can see, this lake is shallow. If we look at the contour lines, like 14 feet out here in the middle of the lake. Here's the creek channel, and the deepest water you're going to find is 24, 25 feet of water. So this is a shallow lake. It does have some nice creek channels though, like it has some nice ledges. Like this is a really good like a ledge. This would be a good summertime spot right here of like offshore ledge. Here's some more offshore ledges. So there's some offshore stuff you could probably fish out here. And then if you move up the lake, you can see there's just no contour lines, and it's super shallow. And so this is probably really sketchy to run. So I would not even bother doing that. I don't want to wreck my boat. And so if we look down here, though, you can see some of the more ideal places to fish. So if we look here, first up, here's that boat ramp. And here's that little dike that we talked about. Let me switch over to Google Earth really quick just to kind of give you a frame of reference of what I'm talking about. So here's the area I'm talking about right here. Those two little dikes right here. If we switch back over to Navionics, here's that area. And as you can see, right here are those dikes, and you can see there's a really good creek channel that bends close by. So you have deep water by those rocks. These fish will probably sit out here when the water freezes over, and then once it starts to warm up, it's really fast for them to move straight from this deep water right up to this rocky shore and just start feeding. This little point could be really good too, because again, you have that creek channel that's really close by. They can move straight up to the rocks. This whole bank is covered in rocks, but this area right here is good. Again, really close to that creek channel. It's 22 feet here. It's a little bit shallower up here. Right, this bank right here actually has a creek channel running right up against it, and this pocket is really good. It has some rock off these points, and just to kind of give you a frame of reference again, I have a pretty good memory of this stuff, but I know that not everyone is following along perfectly. So right here, here's that pocket. You have some nice riprap right here and a nice rocky bank, and that's the exact bank as this right here. And as you can see, it has some nice points, and that creek channel runs right up against it. So again, you can move straight up, boom, boom, onto those points, and it'll warm up, and you can just catch them on lipless crankbaits. Again, another point right here, that creek channel swings by. Just crank those rocky banks, and when you're cranking it, what you want to do is you want to cast that thing out there, and you want to reel it down 5 or 6 times pretty quick to get it into the rocks. Then you just want to barely turn your reel handle. And normally I use a 5-to-1 gear ratio reel, and I just barely turn that handle to keep that bait down in the rocks. And a lot of times I'll fish either 10 or 12 pound test because it'll keep that bait to going deeper. If you're fishing like 20-pound fluorocarbon or monofilament on that crankbait, what'll happen is it'll keep that bait higher in the water column because that thicker line will, float a little bit more, and there'll be more water resistance, and it'll keep that bait higher in the water column. And you want that bait digging in the rocks. And so what I'll do is fish 10-pound test on that flat side crankbait. And that means you have to retie like every 10 minutes because your line will be shredded. But if you stick with that 10 or 12-pound test and just barely crawl that bait through the rocks, turning your reel handle just enough to keep it in the rocks, and fish a 5-to-1 gear ratio reel, you're going to get a ton of bites. And you're going to get bites that other guys aren't, because a lot of them are going to be fishing down there quick with a crankbait, fishing it fast, or fishing on bigger line, heavier equipment. So fish it on that lighter line, slow gear ratio reel, and just crawl it through those rocks, and you're going to catch some fish. So that's pretty much my breakdown of Carlyle Lake. Very straightforward. Just find that riprap and find areas where you can fish pretty much any of the rocky banks, but focus on the areas where the creek channel runs up close to those rocky points. You're going to be catching them. So I want to get back over to the chat. There's 129 people still on. That is awesome, guys. Appreciate all the support on that. Really, really do appreciate that. Let's go over here and see. People are saying people are getting me in the getting my back in the comments. Caleb saying the PH Customs. That's the one I was thinking of. Appreciate that, man. Let's keep going back up. Hey man, can you tell me how I know what depth to fish offshore? Cody Graves. So Cody, basically when you're fishing offshore, you want to look for something called the thermocline. I need to make a video on that, but check out videos. Just type in what is the thermocline on Google, and the thermocline is basically the area where the cool water and the warm water on the lake mix. And I've talked about it in the live stream before. I think it's live stream like number 10 or 11 or 9 or 10 or 11. It's about summer ledge fishing. I've talked about it before. So check out that video and check out the thermocline. That'll start it'll start helping you figure out what depth of water to be fishing on your lake. Other than that, you can just try to experiment. Fish 25 feet of water, fish 30 feet of water, fish 6 feet of water. A lot of times offshore fish don't always get out really deep. Like on Lake Dardanelle, the offshore fish sit in 6 to 8 feet of water, but they're like 200 yards off the bank. And a lot of guys get in trouble or get messed up because they might try to fish in 15 or 20 feet of water and they don't catch anything. But all the best fish are actually in 6 to 8 feet, which is pretty shallow. And a lot of people think that that's too shallow for those fish to get when the water temperature is 98 degrees, but they get not that deep. But then like on some lakes like Beaver Lake, where it's super clear, northwest Arkansas where I fish, sometimes I catch them as deep as 70 feet of water, depending on where the thermocline is and things like that. Also, the thermocline disappears in the fall and the winter, and there's no thermocline, and the fish can get from 2 inches of water down to 200 feet of water if they wanted to. Actually, I don't know if they can live in 200 feet. Maybe like 80 feet. That was a bit of a hyperbole there. See here. Looking at all kinds of stuff. What size jig would you like to use in deeper waters? Gabriel's saying ½ ounce to 3/4 ounce. I use a ½ ounce if I'm fishing less than 15 feet of water, and then more than 15 feet of water, I fish a 3/4 ounce, and then I'll fish a 3/4 ounce pretty much until I get to like 40 feet of water. If I'm fishing 40 feet of water, I might go to a 1 ounce jig, just to keep it on the bottom. Let's see here. On that first ditch in front of the clear spawning pocket, what would lead you to fan cast in open water? Wouldn't you be keying on a specific isolated grassy area? Is there a more efficient way? That's a really good question. Let me go back over here to this lake. Actually, this is not. Let me switch back over. He was talking about the Florida lake that I can't pronounce off the top of my head. Panasoffkee. Let me go back over here. That's a really good question. That was from Clayton Westfall. Hope you're still on, man. Apologize if I missed you. But question was basically, why would you fan cast? And reason for our fan casting, well, there's a lot of images here. Wow, there's a lot of images where this lake is really drawn down. Anyways, here we go. So why would I fan cast? When I say fan cast, what I really mean is you want to cast right down the center of that ditch, but a lot of times what will happen is you can sit out here, and those fish might be sitting on the edge of this grass right here. So if you look closer, you can see it's really dark in here, and you have an edge of the grass. So sometimes I'll put my boat out here, I'll fish down this edge. Sometimes fish will be right in the center of the ditch. Sometimes they'll be on the edges of the ditch, and sometimes they'll be, way back up in here. Or they might be up on the flat, depending on if you have a wall of wind blowing, or maybe if there's a warmer day. So I'll keep my boat out in front of the ditch and then fan cast all the different angles. So down this edge of the ditch, down the center of the ditch, down this edge of the ditch, up on this flat, up on this flat, trying to figure out where the fish are on that given day. A lot of times the fish will group up in really small areas. And so once you find that little patch of grass and you get a bite, then you want to repeat that cast, because a lot of times those fish will sit up on little small areas the size of like the front deck of your boat, just small patches of grass. And so you're right that you want to focus on one little spot, but to find those spots, you want to make sure you fan cast all around the area until you get bit. Great question though. See here. I'm kind of skipping back and forth. Okay, let's see here. What's your favorite square bill with rattles? I like the KVD 1.5. I've used to be sponsored by Strike King, and so because of that, I fish a lot of Strike King baits. I've tried other. I'm trying to look up there to see if I had any square bills, but I've tried other square bills. They're all good. That's just the one I've used for a long time, and it works. And so there's a rattling version is the one I'm talking about. So there's a square bill with rattles, and it's like a Bass Pro Shops exclusive, and so that's the one I would use with rattles. Other than that, actually, I don't really fish. I haven't fished really any other square bills with rattles. So yeah, I would just say the Strike King one. That's just because that's the one I have experience with, but I'm sure there's other good ones out there. No worries if you like another brand or whatever. They all catch fish. What trailers do you like on your chatterbait during the pre-spawn? Normally I'll fish either a swim bait trailer or I'll fish a Strike King Menace Grub. The Menace Grub is like one of my favorite trailers, but a lot of times it's good to fish like I fish a Strike King swimming shiner. Sorry, it's all Strike King baits. I need to think of other baits that aren't Strike King. A Zoom swimming fluke, the Reaction Innovations cane thumper, all those are really good baits to throw. Swimming Cinco, all those are good on the back of a chatterbait in the spring. Let's see here. People picking up the comments. Thanks for everyone commenting and adding to the discussion. That really helps when I miss all these comments. I know that you guys all have a lot of knowledge too. I'm not claiming to be the expert on baits or areas or whatever. So if you ever have a comment or think that I've said something that isn't quite right, or you can add additional context to what I'm saying, please leave it in the comments. I always appreciate that. I definitely don't know everything about bass fishing. I don't think anyone does. And so I want to learn from you guys just as much as you guys want to learn from me. So again, comment as much as you can. I really do appreciate all the comments. It's always really good to hear what you guys have to say. So Clayton's saying I would run all those small pocket points with jerk baits in low light conditions or under incoming wind. It's actually a good call, Clayton, to fish those on Carlyle. We're jumping around a little bit, guys, but fishing those points with a jerk bait. Jerk baits are really good on those riprap banks too. I'm partial to a crankbait myself just because I have a lot of confidence in it, but you can also fish some of these points and stuff. One second here. I'm looking. Here we go. Some of these points with a jerk bait, especially if you fish like a shallower diving jerk bait and maybe fish it on heavier line. Like you can fish a jerk bait on 17-pound monofilament line, and that'll make it dive only 2 or 3 or 4 feet deep. Then you could fish it around these rocks without worrying about getting it digging in the rocks, and you could still have it suspend halfway in the water column. So it's a pretty good deal there. Let's see here. Oh, skipped all the way down to the bottom. 1 second here, guys. You mentioned, okay. You mentioned casting into ditches. Often they're narrow, and I completely get it. It's a funnel, but when it's wide open, isn't that best when there's a target or they're spread out during low light? I'm not really sure. Sorry, I'm trying to understand that comment. Um, I'll have to come back to that one, Clayton. I'm not exactly sure what you meant with that one. Apologize there. I sometimes it's hard to think when it's live. I probably am just misreading it, but I'm trying to make sure I don't completely get stuck in thought for like 10 minutes while we're live on air. But anyways, see here. Keep going through here. Ever fished Chickamauga Lake? I've never fished it. I really want to. Jacob Wheeler, who's a Bassmaster Elite Series Pro, Bassmaster Elite Series Pro, has invited me to go fish there with him, and so I might try to go one of these summers to head over there and do some fishing. That would be really fun. They have giant bass down there, so see if that'll work one day. And then, see here, have I ever fished Lake OH Ivy in Texas? I have not fished that lake. Perhaps a Lake the Pines or Lake Fork breakdown sometime. That's from Mega Rogue 61. Love that Rogue. If you want to be able to put in suggestions for these live streams or the lakes I look at these live streams, check out the link over here, bottom right corner. It's my Patreon page. If you go join that, you'll be able to put your votes in for the lakes, and that's just the best way I've been able to do it. I get so many requests from you guys, it's hard to keep track of them all, and so the best way to do it is to do it through that Patreon system, just because I can easily see everyone's votes rather than going through 200 emails. It's just a little bit overwhelming, and so just go check out the Patreon page and you'll be able to figure that out, or you'll be able to put your lake in. And then let's see here. What is your experience with fishing stump rows, or what's your favorite lure? So stump rows, Bruce Smith Outdoors. I love fishing stump rows. Stump rows are really good, especially when you're fishing in the pre-spawn and in the post-spawn. And for those who don't know what a stump row is basically, actually let me show you a stump row, because I have one that I know about. Let me go to Grand Lake. I spelled that wrong. It's okay though. Give me 1 second here, guys. I'm about to find this. So it's a stump row. Get out of here. Get out of here. It's a stump row right over here that I like to fish sometimes. And you take this lake back down. So stump row, basically an area. Give me 1 minute. Where you have a bunch of stumps or old trees that are lined up in an area. It's really hard to see this. Actually, can I get a better image of this? Maybe not. I found this on Google Earth, that's what I'm trying to show you guys. It's kind of hard to see. I apologize for that. basically, as you can see, there's some trees here, and then you have a nice little pocket where these fish can pull up and spawn. Then out in front of this island, there's a bunch of like black dots. As you can see, those are all stumps, and this is a stump row. And so right here, there's no stumps over here, there's no stumps over here, and you have a bunch of black dots here off this point. Right in here is that stump row, and those fish will pull up on those stumps, and you can fish a crankbait or a chatterbait or a spinnerbait through those stumps. And normally I like to look for them in the post spawn and the pre spawn off the tips of these points, and near like the ends of points. You can normally find them around like housing complexes and stuff, because people will go and cut down the trees, and when the lake floods up you can find them off these like points and stuff. And what'll happen is they'll stage here in the pre-spawn on these little stumps, and then move into these pockets to spawn, and then they'll also pull off onto these stumps right in the post spawn in May and sit there as well. So that's stump row, and they're very good. Let's see here. Getting through most of these. What's the deepest you fish a jerkbait? I'll fish a jerkbait all the way over like 30 to 40 feet of water. I'll normally fish like a deep diving jerkbait when I'm doing that, but a lot of times you can find on like Lake Washita or Beaver Lake in Arkansas, you'll have standing timber that'll stand up off the bottom in 30 or 40 feet of water. It'll sit up like 10 feet or 20 feet off the bottom, and so the tops of those trees will be in 10 to 15 feet of water over 30 or 40 feet of water. And so the actual depth of the lake is 40 feet. The tops of those trees, though, are only in 10 or 15. And I'll fish those jerkbaits over the tops of those trees. And a lot of times you can catch some really big bass in the pre-spawn doing that. Let's see here. Keep skipping to the bottom. Any more map deals available? Justin Newell on the Patreon. No, I'll be opening up more of the map breakdowns and the one-on-one fishing lessons next month. I have to keep demand low because I'm working a full-time job, and I'm not able to put 40 hours a week into doing breakdowns, doing YouTube videos, all that stuff. So I'm trying to manage my time well so I can put out YouTube videos, do the live streams, have a life, have friends. I know you guys probably want me just making fishing content all the time, but I do need those other things in my life to keep me sane. And so trying to put out as much content as I can for you guys, though, going forward here, because it is very fun. And thanks for all the support on my last video. A ton of you guys came out, watched that video, and I really appreciate everything you guys are saying in the comments, and that you're liking the video, sharing out the video. If you do like the content, please subscribe, and please share out the video with friends, and put it on social media. Try to put it as many places as you can if you really like the content. It'll help the channel grow, and I want to get this information out to as many people as I can, because again, I'm trying to be fully transparent with these videos, show you exactly where I fish, where to fish, how to fish, stuff like that. So if you like the content, please share it out. Really helps me out. Also, drop a like to this video and leave a comment if you like these live streams. I think I got pretty much to all the different comments. We have one more from Michael McDaniel. What temp do you start looking to for the bass to spawn or for pre-spawn? Normally, pre-spawn for me is when the water temperatures go from in the low to mid 40s up to the 50s. So once the water temperatures get back into the 50s, that's pre-spawn here in Arkansas. But a lot of times the water temperature in some parts of the lakes never gets below 50. And so I'll think of pre-spawn mainly. I'll focus on the moon phases rather than the actual water temperature. If the water temperature never gets below 50, what I'll do is I'll wait for like the first full moon of the year. Once you get that first full moon, it seems like those fish start to get in the mood to move up to spawn. And then after the second full moon of the year, in like February, March time, when that water temperature gets in the 58 to 60 degree range, those fish will start moving up to spawn. So that's pretty much it. That is what I'm going to talk about for here today, guys. One thing that I want to mention is that next week on the live stream, I'm not going to be breaking down Subscribers Lakes. I'm actually going to be looking at the first FLW tour stop of the 2019 season on Lake Sam Rayburn. I'm going to be breaking down some of the live footage. I'm going to show you exactly where Terry Bolton caught all of his fish, how he caught them, the bait he was fishing, everything. I'm going to break it down completely so you guys know how some of the best anglers in the world are winning bass fishing tournaments. And I'll explain how we found those fish, the process of going into that. I would normally do it in a YouTube video, but they just take so long to make those tournament breakdowns. And so I'm going to do it in the live stream format instead, just because I can get the video out faster to you guys while keeping my other content coming as well. So I'll be doing a breakdown of all of the major bass fishing tournaments on this live stream going forward. So whenever there's a tournament, I'll take a week to study up where the guys are fishing, watch Bassmaster Live, all that stuff, then report out to you guys what they were doing so you know exactly what the pros are doing. So hope you guys enjoy this content. Hopefully you'll enjoy this lake breakdown. Or the tournament breakdown. You'll look forward to that. So other than that, thank you guys so much for checking out the live stream. For all the 126 of you who are still here watching, that's awesome. And again, if you like the channel, if it's your first time, check out some of my other videos. Also, check out my other live streams if you enjoy these live streams, and share out the channel if you like the content and you want other people to see it. So thanks again for checking out the live stream. Thanks again for all of your support as always, and I'll see you next time.